that window. And yeah, hey. So this event tonight is also a bit, of course, to promote the conference, and there's a talk submission. Actually, the new deadline, I haven't announced that yet, is June 26th. On some parts on the website, it will still be June 18th, which is a great idea to have your talk submitted until then. Then you're ahead of the deadline. And so just, the setting of this year's conference is very similar to last year. We will have on-site attendees to also give they will have access to the online part. There's a main track, which is streamed online. There are on-site tracks, which probably also get streamed. And we have a pre-recorded online track. And also regarding on submissions, we're talking about giving talks, preparing talks, submitting talks. It's always a good idea to submit early so that you still can make changes to and think about your submission and not push it out to the last minute. And tonight we're doing lightning talks about speaking. That's the whole concept. And yeah, those 3 speakers is actually now 2 speakers because we had David Sankel planned to join us, but he has a fever today, and so unfortunately we are not going to hear from David. So it's then that we have 2 speakers and more on the program in a minute. The panel is after the lightning talks, and then if you're in below, you can join us in the lounge after this. So this is tonight's program. Phil Nash and myself are here in the live stream, as you can see, and pre-recorded. The videos are ready to play are the talks from last year from Tina Ulbrich, Inbal Levy, and Chandler Kareth, which is they have covered things which are important to speaking online and still valid. So why not play this again for this event? And with that already, let's get started. Phil Nash has prepared a lightning talk, and thank you. Let me tap in now. Seems to have trouble. Here I am again in the studio. Okay, Phil, let's get started. I'll add your... Okay, we're ready. Let's get started.
Excellent. Thanks, Jens. It might be a bit of a stretch to call this a lightning talk. I think I'm going to eat into David's time as well. So we'll see how this goes. And this is none of this is going to be specific to C++. Of course, this is just about speaking in general. So from nervous wreck to pro speaker in 5 easy steps. We always like lists, don't we? And even if you don't consider yourself a nervous speaker, there's always room for improvement. There's always things we can learn. Most of the things that I'm going to talk about, I'm still working on, and I've counted them up recently. I think I've done about 170 talks now. I'm still learning. I'm still improving. So these are just some of the things that I've come across along the way that have helped. So these are the 5 easy steps. We're going to break these down now. So we've got preparation, breathing, posture, contact with the audience, and the 3 Ps. We'll find out what they are. So let's start with preparation. Seems to be a good place to start. So obviously this is what's going to happen before you give a talk. And the better your preparation, of course, the better you're going to be able to get up and give a good talk and be confident in doing that. Now, I've put this quote up. I'm sure you're familiar with this quote: "No plan survives first contact with the enemy." And I put this up for 2 reasons. The first one is, no matter how much preparation that we do, if we've not really done much public speaking before, when you first get up and actually start trying to deliver your material, you're going to find that it feels very different to how you imagined. So be prepared for that. Don't assume that just, you practicing at home and then getting up in front of people, it's going to work the same way. If you're prepared for that, that's going to get you a long way. And we're going to have some tips to try to work through that, to accelerate you to be more confident. But bear that in mind. Now, the other reason I put this up is, well, who actually originally said this? So apparently it's been attributed to Helmut von Moltke from 1871. Except actually he didn't quite say this. It seems to have been a combination of these two recollections from 1961, no plan survives contact with the enemy, or from 1969, no plan survives the first contact of war. Put those two together. Actually, neither of these things are what Helmut said either. What he did say was this: no plan of operations extends with any certainty beyond the first encounter with the main enemy forces. And then all the others are just derivations of that. The point of going through all this is to say we can't over prepare. It's very easy to go down rabbit holes and pick on things that aren't actually that important and I spend a lot of time researching those. And that's fine. It can actually add a bit of color to the talk like I'm doing right now. The trouble is you're likely to end up running out of time for your main preparation and then getting to your talk on the day feeling you're not quite prepared because you spent all your time going down these rabbit holes. I've been guilty of this over and over again, so I know what I'm talking about. So do try to avoid that. Do try to time box what you're going to be talking about. So you do need to know your subject well. The core subject you should be very familiar with. Do extra research if you need to about that beyond what you're going to be talking about, because you're going to get questions as well. Things are going to knock you off. So make sure you know that core subject well. Don't spend too much time going down those extra rabbit holes. And as I say, time box your research so that you still have time to actually put together the talk itself. Now, there's different ways that you can organize all of this. I often will make an outline or I'll just put some rough slides in, and I'll tend to use Comic Sans so I know that these are not the final slides. Otherwise, I can be tempted to sometimes just let those through. And there's other ways to do that. The point is to try to be deliberate in the way you organize your material and get it into its final form. This is not going to be a talk about that, so I'm not going to go into more depth. Just have a plan, even if it doesn't survive contact with the enemy. What I do want to talk more about is rehearsing your material. Do try to make time for at least a few full run-throughs of your talk, even if it's a long talk. Make sure you have at least one time you go end to end. That can be really important. But most of your rehearsal and practice beforehand should be not the full run-through, but actually around specific parts. So the main thing here is to really select a few key parts of your material that you really want to make sure you're very clear on this part. Know what they are up front. Spend extra time practicing and rehearsing those. And these key points are going to come up a few other times in this material. So I want to emphasize that. Make sure you know what your key points are. Have 3, 4, maybe 5 of them at most. And everything else is just supporting those. If you've got too many key points, then you don't have any key points. So that's the main things you can do in your preparation to make sure that when it comes to actually giving the talk, you're going to feel prepared. And that's half the battle. So that's preparation. Now let's talk about breathing. So you might think, if I'm going to talk about breathing, I'd put up a picture of some lungs. But actually, this is the autonomic nervous system. And if you've heard anything about the autonomic nervous system, you probably know that we tend to break it down into 2 parts. There's actually 3, but we don't tend to talk about the other one. So there's the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for our fight or flight response. We'll talk about that in a moment, but I'm sure you're familiar with that. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is more to do with what we might call rest and digest, or I think it's more useful to think of it as just the calming down, recovery, those sorts of things that you can do when you're not in that fight or flight mode. Now, both of these systems are active at all times, but they generally are going to be in a sort of a nice balance where neither one is dominant, and they just come to play when needed. And evolutionarily speaking, when you enter a new situation, unfamiliar situation, there's perceived threats all around, that's going to trigger your fight or flight response to the sympathetic nervous system. And in an evolutionary setting, that's exactly the right strategy. When you're standing in front of a room of people looking at you, expecting you to speak to them, having that same response is not quite so useful, because what's going to happen is when that sympathetic nervous system is triggered, your heart rate is going to go up. Speaking is going to become harder because your esophagus contracts, actually makes it harder to speak. You'll start sweating, and your breathing is going to speed up. You're going to be gasping in short gasps of air. None of that is particularly conducive to feeling calm and relaxed in a public speaking setting. And this is usually what puts people off, having that response and thinking, no, I can't do public speaking. But that auto in the word autonomic nervous system, well, it means automatic, which suggests that this is something that we can't control. We are at the mercy of our sympathetic nervous system. But that's not actually true. We can control it. We can control it with our inner thoughts once we're practiced at it. But we can also control it physically through our breathing. So I mentioned that our breathing speeds up when we take short gasps. But if we take control of that and we have long, slow, controlled breaths, then we actually start to take control of our sympathetic nervous system, and it deregulates it back down so that the parasympathetic nervous system can start to perhaps dominate again. So you probably heard about this breathing pattern, the long, slow, controlled breaths. You breathe out, you hold on the exhale for a few seconds, long breath back in, hold on the inhale again. Don't underestimate how powerful this can be. This directly controls your autonomic nervous system and gives you back that control that you will feel that you're lacking when you're up there in a public speaking situation. To make best use of this, you're going to need to practice this regularly, ideally daily. But if you can't do it daily, then just at least doing this from time to time gets you into the habit of being able to take this control. And then do it just before your talk. Particularly if you're up there on a stage just about to speak, that's the perfect time to take that back, that control, get control of yourself, get control of your breathing, and be ready to give your talk. Maybe even during your talk, you can find opportunities to do this. If you have a pause, maybe you're doing a demo or some other time you're not actively speaking, take the opportunity to take a long breath again, get that control back. Make it a reflex. So anytime you feel like you're losing control, you now know how to gain that control back. There's obviously a lot more that can be said here. Could do a whole hour or more talk on this, but I've only got a few minutes, so I'm going to move on to the next item, which is posture. It's actually closely related because there's an evolutionary aspect to this. That when we feel vulnerable, we tend to sort of close up. So our shoulders will roll forward. We may tend to lean forward. And all of our body language is all sort of closed off because we're trying to protect ourselves. And again, that's not very useful when we're trying to be open and engaging with our audience and speaking in a relaxed way. So very similar to the breathing. And again, similar to the breathing, we can take conscious action in the other direction. So if our shoulders are rolling forward, well, we can pull our shoulders back, but not to make them tight and tense. So we need to get the shoulders relaxed, just pull back. And one way you can do this is actually if you sort of hold your hands open forwards, then naturally the shoulders will go back, but still be relaxed. And that will actually help you to feel more open to the audience, more relaxed and more confident. And you'll project confidence as well. But there's another part too to posture, which can be really important as well. And that's the head-neck alignment. So your head is actually very heavy. It's one of the heaviest parts of the body. And if you are starting to roll forward a bit, your head's going to come forward and it's going to start, you're going to end up with some sort of cycle where you're going more and more forwards. And you're going to feel like you're not in control again. For the head and neck to be aligned, the head should be above the shoulders, above the hips, above the knees, and above the feet. All those things should be in line. And that sounds like a lot to keep in mind. But fortunately, our bodies actually work such that all of that happens automatically if we just do one thing. And that's just to allow our head to float forwards and up, which sounds silly, But try it, and you'll find that everything else, if you can relax your shoulders as well, just sort of naturally falls into line, and you instantly feel more confident, more open, and more in control. And that's a central part of what's called the Alexander technique, which has been known for over 100 years now as a really powerful technique for all sorts of performers, singers and actors, and anyone that has to have a stage presence. They'll study the Alexander technique, and there's a lot more to it. That's another rabbit hole you can go down if you like. But just remember, let your head float forwards and up, and that's really going to help you to open up, and also give that opportunity to do that breathing as well. So that's posture. We need to move on with contact with the audience. So that's our next point. Now, most of this section is going to be about in-person speaking. For online speaking, like I'm doing now, I found one of the best tips to get a connection with your audience is to have some way that they can interact with you. So whether it's through some sort of a chat system, a Q&A, polls, anything like that. Now, we're not doing it here because this is technically a lightning talk, but normally I would have something early on, do it as early as possible, where you're going to give me some sort of feedback, something to let me know that you're actually out there and you're listening. Because when you're speaking into the void, like I'm doing right now, it can be really hard to, while you're thinking about giving your talk, also you're also thinking, is actually anybody listening? Is there anybody out there? Is this working? As soon as you get that first bit of feedback, it's not just that you know that people are there, but you feel it as well. And that helps you to relax. So that's the one tip I'll give for online speaking. But for in-person speaking, when you're faced with a sea of faces, even if it's a small group, it can look like a sea of faces, especially if you're new to public speaking. Don't think of the audience as a big faceless mob. Instead, think of them as a collection of individuals and look at them as individuals. Look around the room at individual faces. And as you're speaking, actually direct your sentences, a sentence or two at a time, to just one person at a time. Try to go around the whole room, and you will find that there are people with different levels of engagement, especially if it's in a larger room. There's always going to be somebody who looks a bit zoned out, people on their phones or their laptops. They may all have good reasons for doing so. Don't assume that you're just being boring. Just ignore those people. Find the friendly faces. There's always going to be someone that's smiling, nodding along, just actively engaged. There's going to be a few of those. Find those people and concentrate more on those. Say sentences to those. But do look all around the room, especially a larger room. It can be very tempting to focus on a corner of the room and to exclude the rest. But you're not going to feel connected with the audience unless you're speaking to the whole room. And doing so is also going to make you feel more in control as well. So look around the room, find the friendly faces, talk to those individuals, and don't think of them as a mass of a mob that's out to get you. So that's connecting with the audience. One more section to get through. I think we're already over time. So let's see how far we can go before Jens pulls me off. The 3 Ps. I think this is perhaps say the biggest practical point for actually performing the talk itself. So if you've heard of the 3 Ps before, you'll know they are pitch, power, and pace. And in particular, being able to vary these things. So some of us are naturally expressive speakers, but even if we are, when we get up on stage, that might change because it's a different environment. Again, it's a different skill set. And it's something that we need to consciously learn about and practice and get your own feedback. But you can do it, you can improve, and you can master this skill, public speaking, if you consider the 3 Ps. So stage actors know that speaking is a performance. And if you've ever seen a stage actor, you know that they actually exaggerate things like pitch, power, and pace. Because if they don't, then it doesn't come across in a public speaking setting. Now, one way that you can tune into this is to record yourself. And for a lot of people, particularly those new to public speaking, that's the last thing they want to do. I hear people all the time say, I never listen to recordings myself. I hate it. Well, the thing is, if you record yourself and then think, oh, what did I do wrong? And then try it again, record yourself again, keep iterating until you do actually start to see some improvement. That feeling, well, it never completely goes away, I'll be honest, but it does get a lot easier. And you will find that you can tolerate listening to yourself and you'll always learn something. There's always something you can improve on, and it's better for you to catch that yourself and iterate on it. So let's have a look at the 3 Ps. Start with pitch. I tried to be fairly brief on these, but I've actually got a lot of points. So the pitch, especially varying this, may seem the most unnatural if you are new to public speaking. Again, recording yourself is one of the best ways to both capture what you're currently doing and see how you can improve on it. But varying this a lot can seem very unnatural to us, especially to begin with. So concentrate on using it for a particular meaning. For example, using higher pitches to convey excitement. Or if you want to get more serious, then you can take a lower tone. The important thing is to keep it varied. Obviously, we don't want to be monotonous and just speaking on the same tone, but we also don't want to repeat the same pattern over and over again, which we can often fall into if we're not paying particular attention to this. So variety is the key here, and practice is what will let us be able to do that. So power, this one is a little bit different. We might have to be a little bit more careful about this. By default, we want to aim for mostly a consistent level of sort of volume and power to our voice, because that's going to be comfortable to our listeners. So it's usually going to be a little bit above our everyday speaking level. I like to think of my public speaking voice as being different to my everyday voice. So a little bit above, but not too much that it's going to be uncomfortable. And we need to allow some headroom so that where needed, we can add a bit of extra punch for emphasis. Allow a bit of headroom for that. Quieter levels, though, they're a bit rarer, but you can use them if you want to add a bit of mystery in. Maybe you want to share a secret with your audience. Be careful. You want to make sure they can hear you. But again, having a range of power built into your material can make it more interesting, and it can make you feel more in control. So lastly, let's look at pace. Now, one of the things I struggle with the most, always guilty of, I'm doing it right now, speaking too fast. And there could be many reasons for this. In my case, it's often because I've just got too much material to get through. And so I'll naturally speak fast. And the worst part is when I don't have too much material, I've deliberately made less material so I don't have to speak so fast. I forget and I fall back on the habit and I speak too fast anyway and just finish early. So I'm still working on that. You may also be speaking too fast if you're feeling a bit nervous. There can be other reasons as well. Again, it's something to be conscious of. Try to take back that control. But again, varying the pace can be really important. So if there's something you want to emphasize, you can really slow down for that emphasis. And if you have been speaking at a faster pace, slowing down draws attention to what you're saying. And again, not only does your audience pick up on that, but you personally start to feel, yeah, I'm in control of this situation. And I'm deliberately slowing down here. And if you've just got some fill-in material that's just bridging from one section to another, it's okay to speed through that a bit faster, because if somebody doesn't quite follow you, that's okay. And that can also then give that contrast for when you do need to slow down. But perhaps the most important part of varying your pace is the pause. The pause can add real dramatic effect. It can really emphasize a point you want to drill home, but it can also give you a chance to think about what you want to say next, or make it seem like you're really sort of drawing attention to this particular phrase. So I'm going to emphasize the word pause again as well. It's also a time that you can take that breath that you needed. You can recenter yourself. Remind yourself of all those other things that perhaps, but it's easy to forget them in the moment. take the opportunity of a pause to breathe, look at your posture, think about the 3 Ps, and so on. Look around the room. But also for the audience, if you're hurtling along at a fast pace, the audience is not going to be able to absorb everything you say. They need those pauses to absorb and reflect on your material and to know which points they need to pay particular attention to. So don't skip the pauses. They're actually easy to do and one of the most effective tools you have in varying your pace, making your speaking more interesting, and adding that dramatic effect. So that's the 3 Ps. Don't forget the 3 Ps: pitch, power, and pace, and varying them. And also good preparation, paying attention to your breathing, your posture, and maintaining contact with the audience. If you keep these things in mind, you should become a pro speaker in no time at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. That was awesome. There's one important thing for pauses, which speakers should do. It's very effective, and it's also very good for you as a speaker. You should drink. There's always like a glass of water next to you on stage for that purpose, that you drink, and because you will spend so much water without ever noticing it. But this is like you know, when you take a break, that's a good opportunity. Also, like having title slides is really great. Like chapters, and then every chapter has a title, and you take a break and you take a drink. The audience is getting ready, thinking about that, or like good examples. Anyways, that was a really nice talk, and I'm looking forward to the panel. Now I quickly go back to my slides. Thank you, Phil. So next is the talk by Tina Ulbricht, which is this one. Let's see.
Welcome, everyone. When you talk about giving conference talks to other people, most people say that they don't have anything to talk about. And I said the same in the past as well. And now I have given several talks already. I still consider myself a beginner speaker, but I realized that I do. Most people say that they don't have anything to talk about. And I said the same in the past as well. And now I have given first already. I still consider myself talking about it will benefit others. The same applies to any project, like private projects you're working on or open source projects, like anything you're working on or using. Or think about which questions, problems, or challenges have you or someone in your team encountered. There's a high probability that many people have the same questions and are in need of getting them answered. So why not turn those discussions and solutions into conference talks? So next, maybe ask yourself, what do you want to learn more about? Have you ever read an article or watched a conference talk, but you wanted to learn more about the subject? Giving a talk is the perfect opportunity for you to get the topic, to get to know the topic in depth. You will always learn a lot in the process of writing a talk, way more than just using some library feature. Or maybe you learned about some interesting concept or language feature, and you want to figure out how you can use it in your code. I always love to learn about real-life examples of the new features. So that's why I personally also like to give talks that are more practice-oriented. But don't think you need to be cutting edge to be giving a talk. The basics are very underrepresented at conferences, and most people don't use the new standards right away anyways. So consider talking about the basics. And as I said, not everyone has this knowledge and many people will benefit from it. And tell us what excites you. Do you like the theory over examples? Then do a talk about theory. Do you like examples and live coding more than theory? Then do that. Do you want a discussion rather than a 1-hour monologue? That's also fine. A talk you're excited about will always be better than a talk that you don't care about. And there is an audience for every style of talk. Also, you can play around with those elements and find out what presentation style you prefer. It doesn't have to be perfect in the beginning. In fact, you shouldn't strive for perfection at all. Just give it your best and everything will be fine. And this, I think, is very important. Talk about your ideas. I can't tell you how often I had an idea and I talked myself out of it. It's only once I started talking about my ideas that I got some great feedback and encouragement. Others might also have a different viewpoint you can include in your talk, or they might know if there's already something similar out there. So talk about your ideas and gather some feedback and don't talk yourself out of it. And lastly, relax. Speaking might look intimidating and speakers might look like they know everything, but they are just normal people like you and me. Speaking is a skill and you learn and improve by doing it. So here's a summary of everything I just said. I hope you find something useful in it, and you can take a screenshot here at this point if you want to. So just to summarize, what are you working on? Which libraries are you using or writing? Which open source projects are you using or working on? Which questions, problems, or challenges have you or someone in your team encountered? Consider talking about the basics. Don't assume everyone knows what you know. Talk about the things that you are excited about. Take your time to find your presentation style. Talk about your ideas and get some feedback. And in the end, relax and have fun. So all I can say is you can do it, try it out, you might like it, and I'm looking forward to see a lot of new speakers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. Yes, also here. Thank you, Tina. So I already mentioned David Sankel wanted to give wanted to contribute to this today. Unfortunately, he got sick. Maybe he already, I don't know. It's like, did he prepare his slides? So I hope to see his contribution to this event next year, maybe. But David, we all hope that you're gonna be soon fit again, and so we will continue with. Oh, that's myself. I also prepared to talk. That's actually in my slides. So yeah, let's go. So I wanted to quickly, cover a bit about speaking online and motivate you to give talks online. Phil's talk was already a very good introduction into giving talks, and a lot of that is true for giving talks online. Except that if you give talks online, you have to be comfortable with keeping your own pace and just not necessarily have always the feedback from the audience because you only have one monitor, for example, me. But I want to point out that speaking online for you as someone who wants to start speaking is a huge opportunity. If you want to get started in preparing talks, giving talks, give tutorial talks like for usage, stuff which is easy to prepare to give, which is interesting for many programmers which want to get used to or talk about something. And you can present your ideas to an online audience very easy nowadays. And let me quickly point out that Me and C++ Online this year has an online track again. With pre-recorded talks mostly. This is the default. We would like to pre-record most of the talks, when not like all of them. And I actually am able to, I have the tooling for that, as we're just, using here for streaming. This also can record talks, so we will be doing that in this setting. This is a lot easier to organize, and at the day when you speak, you will not have any internet or tech problems. And also, of course, for me as an organizer, this is just a lot better to know that something in the cloud triggers the video feedback and then it plays. And it's a lot less stressful for both sides. So that's why we went for online content to say, if you are able to pre-record, we would prefer that. It's not always possible. Sometimes speakers don't have time for that, and they then have to give their talks live. That is also working, as we know from last year. Also want to point out, like, if you're already into video recording and making videos, and you want to make a fun video for the conference, which is your talk, presents on some topic, that's also an option. And I know that, unfortunately, David Sankel we don't have here, but David Sankel actually did that once. It was an awesome talk. And I know we have some YouTubers, so if you have a YouTube channel or you want to start one, that'd be an option to have your video as a talk at Meeting C++. And also this, of course, is then that I want to reach out with that to all the people which so far couldn't give a talk at Meeting C++ because they're not able to come to Meeting C++ because we're in Berlin. And maybe you have visa issues. Maybe you have just travel issues that you don't like to fly, especially not long distance, or maybe you have a family and you can't just fly away for a weekend. Maybe your current boss doesn't like the idea and wouldn't let you go, and you don't want to take like your holidays off. That's fine. Maybe your boss has a bit of a different opinion on that when you just tell them that there's a slide for your employer that can give a lot more support to your talk. Also, maybe you're able to talk about something what you did at work. Some companies are not very happy about that idea, and other companies are like totally happy to let you share what they did or what you did at your work, what your team did, and make that part of your talk. Content-wise, new material is great, but old ideas are also worth thinking about. They can have their merit. And maybe you already have slides, right? Maybe you already do presentations at work, and you have slides about C++ 11 or 14 or 17 or 20, and you just have a basis and can just turn that into a talk, add a bit of slides, add a bit of material, screenshot here, some statistics here, some poll there, and you have a talk. The other thing I want to stress is, like, maybe you already have given the talk, right? For the online track, we're looking for speakers, so maybe you could give it out again online, and maybe that is for you to the way to become a speaker at Meeting C++ this year. And I want to point out that, of course, if you don't have that old talk laying around, we're always looking for new speakers. You're welcome to join us. Either if you're able to come to Berlin and speak on site and adjust your breathing on stage, as Phil just mentioned, or you're able to pre-record a talk on your own or with Meeting C++. Also, maybe your company has, like, I know that some speakers have pre-recorded their talks with their company equipment. So maybe your company has a studio or something like that. It can be used for that. And in that way, also you can add to the knowledge base of C++. I want to point out that you don't need to be an expert necessarily to start speaking. If you are an expert or consider yourself an expert, that is also a good way to start speaking or continue speaking. but you don't need to be if you just give an introductory talk into presenting. That's how we do game dev at our company, or that's how we use Qt, Boost, Diungui. There's so many frameworks used in C++, Fully, and all the others come to mind. Introduction talks on how to get started with that, how to build it, how to use it. Some examples. Is really low-hanging fruit, which usually is not picked up by a lot of speakers. If you want to start speaking, that's a good way to start. I want to point out, if you're speaking and submit talks, submitting multiple talk ideas is great, especially if you submit to the topics that have competition. There's a lot of Rangers talks this year. 2 years ago, when Tina Ulbrich, which we just saw speaking, she submitted a Rangers talk, and that was a great introduction into Rangers. And that was a great idea back then. This year, I already see that we have a lot of talks on Rangers, and probably more coming because of every speaker submitting sees this. Last year, coroutines was a really popular topic where we had 5 to 6 submissions and 2 or 3 people speaking on the conference about it. And yeah, be aware that, potentially if a committee member or paper authors or just general other speakers have submitted or may be submitting on the same topic that is currently popular or is like a top feature of C++ 20 or 23, it's still fine to submit to that. But think about having a second horse in the race, which maybe is just an easy to do talk on an overview on how to get started with Qt, Boost, or any other library in C++, or maybe with Git, some other connected technologies, tools. These talks are very, very valuable for the audience, and they're usually not that often submitted. So that's kind of a venue, an avenue, field where new speakers also can fill in the holes which we have currently in the speaking landscape, where people submit things and talks to. Especially like things in game dev, we have very, very few submissions in game dev, if at all. I want to mention embedded. I want to mention finance, anything work-related, science, scientific computing. There's a lot of great topics out there where you can give talks on, which are not necessarily always covered in our submissions. So if you're the one person to submit the talk for that, you're probably having a good horse in that race. And quick word on the talk lengths. On-site talks should be 60 minutes with 5 to 15 minutes on questions. Online talks have the same length on the schedule. It can be a lot less. I've seen people give online talks in 30 minutes, which probably could have been an hour if they had the pacing under control. But I also have seen that a lot of people went overtime online. So if you're speaking online, don't be focused on the time. Don't be worried about that. I've seen people go over time. I've seen people to be faster, and it never mattered to the talk. Okay. One thing, if you're like really short, if your pacing is out of control, I had that issue once. I couldn't control myself because I was on stage speaking and finished my talk 25 minutes too early. And in that case, I pulled a rabbit out of my head. I just was like, no, now we have the questions, and I have left a little bit more time for questions so that we can debate about this topic. And, the audience felt engaged with that, and we had an audience and happy and engaged discussion and question round. So that worked out. So, it's a trick maybe to have up your sleeve if you're really happen to have a talk finish early, then you can always engage with the audience. And the last thing, of course, is always to submit your talk. And with that, let me have Inbal's talk play.
My talk is, I think, maybe the next step after you pick the topic. And this is something that I learned from my experience, which is not very broad, but still I have some of it. So I think it's very important to be able to distilling your message in the talk. So let me explain. So let's say I want to explain to you about vector, and please excuse my very simple example. So this code is actually coming from a website explaining about stud vector. But as you can see, this code is not fitting for the slide. You can't give a talk about vector, fill in the slide like that. So for example, the creation of the vector, we could basically use initialization list. The part of printing, you could use a print function and have a comment explain your intention. Here, for the pushback, you can do the same. Notice the comment again. And for the pop-up back, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say, in short, is that visualization is very important when you try to express an idea on a presentation. Another example, let's say I want to explain the vector more deeply. I could use images. I could also show, just with a simple image, what happens when I add an element. So please excuse my very, very simple and not well designed photos, but I hope you get the idea here. So I want to talk about data visualization. Generally, in our world, people don't have a lot of time to capture a lot of complex ideas, but when they do come to your talk, that means that they're actually very anxious to learn. So I think giving them good visualized explanations would be very helpful and help them get more connected with the ideas they're trying to express. So here on the right, you can see it's a meta picture. It's a picture talks about good visualization. And this is actually coming from a very cool book called Information is Beautiful. So there's two of them as far as I know, and I would highly recommend them. I'm not connected to the author in any way, but those are really awesome books. One is called Information is Beautiful. The second is Knowledge is Beautiful. And in general, they talk about how do you express information in a visual way. So I think what I'm trying to say is create an experience for your audience. Also communicate with them. And most important, care about your audience. You want to have them enjoy your talk. So to summarize, I would say that creating a good talk will include having a good structure. Use visualization and minimization in your talk. Get some perspectives. Have other people that know this topic see your talk, give you feedback, and even just have more broad perspective of the topics that you have. Decide what are the takeaways that you want your audience to take from your talk. And of course, what Tina have said, and I think is very important, present your own views. The talk would not be great unless you put what you feel that is important and what you want to express. And also, just make sure you bring all the equipment you need. This is very important because it's never fun to find out too late. But to summarize, a good talk is about what you bring. Thank you. And of course, I just want to say, if you want to reach out, I will be happy to help with talks and presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbora. That was very good, very nice. Chandra Karras is next. Let's quickly let And come out.
Good code samples and slides, and we saw a live demo of how to actually build those slides. Now it's time to have a live demo about live demos. I like meta, and so I figured this would be a fun way to do this. So here we're gonna kind of go through and do a little bit of a live demo. So what are we actually talking about? What are live demos even good for doing? So the first thing that I think about with a live demo is it's really good for zooming in on some topic, right? This is a way to engage the audience, right? Something you can show practical, real tools that you want people to use. It's really great for showing very specific code or specific details of something that's fairly complex. It's good at focusing on how, much more than why. And that means that there's also something that live demos are not really good at, and this is kind of zooming out, right? You don't want to try and step back or really get to the bigger picture with the live demo. Kind of, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't engage the audience very well. It's hard to get people to focus on what or especially why you're saying something when you're doing a live demo. They're reading the demo, right? And so if you want to kind of, highlight your perspective or focus on an interpretation, a live demo doesn't tend to be the best thing. Right, so let's look at how we actually want to do a live demo. First thing you have to do is you have to plan every single step. This is hard to do, but it's really, really, really important, right? How do you actually get into the live demo? How do you move from one step to the next step? How does everything work while you're doing this? You want a good plan from the beginning. Another thing to think about is how do you wrap up the live demo and go back to your slides? This is super, super important. If you have a live demo that you're mixing into the rest of a talk. And I'm curious, everybody should think about how many pages of notes they think I prepared in order to be able to do, a 7-minute lightning talk on this. I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see, and we'll actually look at the notes I have later. If you have your plan, what are the kind of key components of making your live demo a success? The first thing to think about is you've got to work within the projector and the audience view. You can't be trying to make the projector of the audience look at your live demo the way you would while you're working at a desk with a big monitor. You have to go the other direction, right? Put yourself into the shoes of having a low resolution, terrible projector with bad lighting, right? And so I've zoomed all the way in, and this is actually the view that I'm looking at, right? I'm looking at the same thing you're seeing here. And it's important that you kind of learn how to work in that environment and feel comfortable working in that environment. You also have to learn the tools you're going to be presenting. You've got to know them really, really well, much better than you need to actually just use them day to day. And you got to know how to make them work for the demo. If you're going to use Visual Studio Code or an IDE, you need to be able to just jump right into it, pull things up, move around, right? If you want to show a preview, you have to know where it's going to come up. When it doesn't fit easily on the screen, you got to know how to fix that, how to rearrange everything so that you get the view that you want to show the audience, right? I'm a big fan of virtual desktops for live demo. It lets you kind of move between different tools in a way that's pretty smooth. You always have the same layout, the exact thing you're expecting each time you look at it. You want to find this tooling workflow that's going to be effective when you're demoing it live. The next is you have to make this feel real to the audience, right? You don't want to do something that's just going to oversimplify it, right? It's tempting to oversimplify it. In slide code, you don't have to make it compile, but when you're actually doing a live demo, you need stuff to compile. You need it to work with the real tools, and that's really hard. And so, actually use stuff here. And so I'm actually using, I have my editor set up. It does automatic formatting of my markdown here. You want to try and make it real so that people actually see how things work. The next thing is that you do want to make this live in the moment. So you'll see me make mistakes here, right? And that's fine. It's good to actually have some mistakes that you have to correct live, right? And then people can kind of see that, no, this is actually real. It's actually happening live, and it keeps them engaged. The other thing is to never, ever stop talking. And this is, I think, the hardest thing about a live demo. It's especially hard when you're going to actually talk about something that you're not currently typing. And when you're trying to do this, it's very hard to keep it in your head what you're trying to say and what you're trying to type. And you'll notice the technique I'm using here, which is I'm alternating. And so I'll type a word and I'll say a word, and I'll type a word and I'll say a word. It's really hard for your brain to handle text in two different streams. And so have a plan for how to do that and how to make it through it. This is also one of the weird times when things like and hesitations, that's actually fine when you're live demoing, because what you want to do is keep the audience engaged while you have time to make it through your live demo. Next, make it fast and comfortable. One thing you'll notice is that I move fast in a live demo. I move really, really fast. And that's because people can easily get bogged down in the live demo. And so you've got to rush just a little bit. But of course, you can't go too fast or it'll lose people. It's a hard balance to strike. And so I don't have a perfect advice here, but it's something you've just got to do. All right. Next up, okay, I said to plan, scratch all of that. It's not actually about planning. It's about practice. I mean, you need some plans. Not without a plan. You can do a great live demo with a minimal plan, but you have to practice, right? You have to make it comfortable and fast. And you don't move this, like a lot of people have talked to me after a live demo and they're like, how do you type that fast? By typing the same thing over and over and over again. I don't normally type this fast, but you got to practice it until you're comfortable and you're fast and you can keep the audience moving. And you have to practice things going wrong. And so you don't get locked into this rigid script. So let things go wrong, mess up intentionally, accidents happen, that's fine. You want to kind of get that full experience when you're practicing. All right. The last thing is you've got to cheat. Sometimes you're going to be going like, I forgot what I'm supposed to type. That's fine. Just have something prepared ahead of time, right? Just pull out a prepared selection of things really fast. This is not a big deal, right? People actually are fine with it. They know things are going to go wrong. The key for you as the presenter is to just roll with it, right? Have those canned bits, catch back up. You can even use a pre-filled framework, kind of like what I'm using here, to move yourself through each step of what you want to present. Things do go wrong. Last but not least, you should really be honest and provide your source. This is actually one of my big mistakes that I've made in a lot of talks, is that I don't always kind of upload the source, provide people access to it. This hurts two things, both the credibility. It's really hard for people to believe live demo if they can't reproduce it, but it also hurts accessibility. Like it's nice that I have decent contrast and a big font, but even better is to actually have a Git repository that people can go and check out and correct whatever they've misread. I understand like uploading can be hard. This is actually my problem, is that, if you work for a company and you have to like sort out licenses or something, but I really encourage everyone, try to do this. I'm actually going to try and get this uploaded on my GitHub page just so that I actually have done this yet, but I couldn't get it ready before the talk. But try and actually provide a link to things. It's so helpful if you're doing a live demo to then kind of show all of the inputs so that people can see them. And so with that, I do want to just show you what kind of notes went into the planning for this, right? And so these are all of the notes that I was taking to myself in my initial run through, trying to plan out every step of what I want to do, okay? Hundreds of lines of notes went into a 7-8 minute talk. And so with that, I've done a live demo, and I hope this helps you all do your next live demo, because I think it's a really fun way to engage audiences.
Thank you, Chandler. That was awesome.
Yeah, and we're back with a normal program. Just let me, yeah. So we now have the last talk, which is one thing we actually didn't cover last year, but I wanted to cover this year. So let's go. Thanks, Chandler. That was actually an awesome demo last year. But I also want to quickly say something about, how do you submit the talk for the new speakers? Also, just have for the folks in Hubilo, there's some polls which you can take. So I just launched 2 new polls. And so how do you submit a talk to MIDI C++? There's 2 URLs. One is to submit the talk itself, and the conference URL just before this is started. And this is similar for other conferences. Right now, CPPCon also has their call for talks, and other conferences are going to happen over summer, and then they're going to have that similar process for them. And it's not like that we have like a standard here. It's like everyone is doing it slightly different. They're going to have that next year. And so this is, of course, a bit opinionated of a lot of things I say. So take this with a grain of salt, okay? First, yeah, create an account. That's most of the submission systems today are account-based. Of course, subscribe to my newsletter and to the weekly blog roll where I share all the blog links with you every week. And then you need to submit your talk. And the first thing you will do is to fill out your speaker bio. Quickly want to go through some of those things. We actually have now a review group. So if you want to help review talks or just see what other people write in their talk descriptions, join the group. And in this box is your speaker bio, which of course is the most important part. And want to point out, if you want to add a link, that's this symbol. A lot of people seem still not to know that. And the picture of you when you submit a talk is optional. When your talk is selected for the conference, of course, it's not as optional anymore. And now you're ready to submit your talk. So let's break this up, this form as you just saw. Let's go for the talk title first. Keep your talk title short. There are some people which like really like to have talk titles which are like, contain a comma and a complete different sentence after it. That's too long. Don't include subtitles. I think it's like for technical reasons, it's probably in our world better to avoid certain characters in titles, like, especially commas, semicolons, and other stuff. If you don't absolutely have to have that in your talk description, not in the talk, but in the talk title, don't do that. Reasons are like HTML, entity conversion, etc., okay? Exceptions like, C++ is fine. And if you have to have it in your talk title, that's fine. Just want to take a note. Good titles are engaging. So how to and so on. Using C++ 20, 23, 17, 11, 14, 26 for what you do. Memes can work. Introduction, overviews, and tutorials can just, say what they are. Introduction into writing application with libngui or libboost, Qt, etc. I also want to point out that well-known speakers get away with talk titles that are sometimes questionable or maybe not as good for you as a new speaker. Because a lot of people will judge the talk by the new title, by the title if they don't know the speaker already. And sometimes speakers just get away with a bad title or with a catchy title because they're already well known and they already, get the points for having done lots of good talks and being a good speaker. So if you're new to speaking, pay attention to your talk title, and just because, the big and your speaker idol, the speakers which you saw, which you favorite as, which you think are really good, they might not be the best orientation for you in regarding for the title. Talk description is what your talk is about. You should add here more than a paragraph. Also, it's not a blog post, so don't put too much into it. Again, there's a possibility to actually put a really physical HTML link into here, and be aware that if you're copy pasting this from some other source, you're copy pasting artifacts from like Word documents, etc., into this. That is why I highlighted here this symbol, which is the HTML code, which control will generate, and there you will be able to see like if you have any inline CSS or other things and other shenanigans in there. And also this is the way to put your code into pre-snippets, okay, into pre-tags. That's the way how to present code on my platform and on others too. The outline is how do you envision your talk? I often put slide titles in here, and others do that too. What people should know about you or this talk in specific, which isn't in the talk description. Maybe also stuff you don't want to put in the talk description because it's important for the talk, but for people reviewing it's a free text form. You can put in whatever you want to put in there, but it's visible to the reviewers and voters on my platform. The attendees are never going to see it when they're not participating in the voting. And if they participated in the voting, they're not going to remember it. Ideas, etc. is just an open field. Now, what I find out is a lot of people seem to fill out this, and you then should revisit, after filling out the outline, your talk description. Because the most popular feedback I have given to speakers last year was, your outline contains the second or third paragraph of your talk description, just in bullet points. That's something like which you put in your outline, which is great that you mentioned that, but that should also be in your talk description. That's the best thing we learned last year through the review system, that a lot of speakers should review their talk description after doing the outline. The audience is something we cover to have that. Who should come to your talk? Orientation. All combinations make sense. Give people an orientation of the level of your talk. That's what this is about. There's 4 more options which I quickly want to cover. As a conference organizer, it's important to me that we have some talks which are like new or not has been at every conference already. So if your talk is like new and you prepared for the conference, if you don't submit it to another conference in front of me in C++, and you're really like saying, well, this is the one talk I have, and this is I want to go to Berlin and speak at Meeting C++ and present this talk as new. That's what this is about, and it's also important for as an organizer to me to know this. It's also going to be displayed in the voting, as far as I know, and will give you maybe a little bit of an edge if you're like preparing a new talk. And I already mentioned the review system we have in place. So if you want to have your review and like feedback on your talk, then check this. Meeting C++ supports up to 2 speakers. So if you have a second speaker, check this box and it triggers the second speaker bio form in the next form, and you will be able to enter their name, email, and their bio. And yeah, so we have an online only track, which is pre-recorded, as I already mentioned prior. That's what this box is for, to tell us this. And as I said, it's if you want to come to Berlin, you don't have to do that. But there's no on-site only box, because that would be too much. Everyone may speak online. I understand that some speakers don't want to speak online, but if your talk doesn't get accepted and we still have open slots in the online track, some people might want to go for it. On the other hand, there are speakers which are not able to come to Berlin, which I already mentioned prior to, and they may want to indicate that this talk is for the online audience and that they will prepare it or do the pre-recording with Meeting C++. And in that case, that gives a huge edge for your talk, and also helps us to select the talks for the online presence of the conference. And last but not least, of course, submit your talk. And quickly mentioning again that, of course, with the login, you're able to edit it. And that's also like one thing which I find that is important, because you submit your talk and the next day you will find something, or you will have a shower thought in the next week to something to add, something to change. And we are able to give you feedback, and you'll be able to edit the talk in the way we do that. So that's good. The next steps from our side then is, once the call for talks has ended, which is 26th of June, about 1 week, you'll be able to edit your submission. Then the voting is where, the talk info is visible to most voting folks, former speakers and some other folks. My team sees all of the speaker info so that we kind of balance it in the voting. And then the selection is guided by the track for the voting results. Last year was special, was at 10 years and hybrid. We're hybrid this year again, but we have more tracks on site. Actually, this year's conference is pretty much modeled after last year's conference, because it was quite a good success, and it's a model we kept for this year. And so this year is not as special, but we're still, kind of not as limited in the space due to the pandemic anymore. So if you want to come to Berlin, you're welcome. And I'm looking really forward to see many of you there. And with that, thanks for listening. Submit your talk until June 26th. On the website, on some pages, it still says the June 18th deadline. I haven't announced that officially that this is now moved to June 26th due to my holiday being longer. So that's something which I will change. But it's on the submission form, it's already changed, which is an important part. If you have any questions, if you're watching this on YouTube, in the comments and otherwise in the chat, we will be doing the panel now. So thanks everyone for speaking either today or last year. And the panel will start soon. Let me quickly go in the studio and see everyone is here. Then let me bring Inval online and let's see what is okay. I think we're ready for the panel. You will have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Good.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Great to see you both.
Yeah.
Hi, Inbal.
Yeah, so we're gonna get ready for the panel. If you need to get something to drink or like need a small break, that will be fine. But otherwise, we're live right now, just letting you know. And with that, we need questions for the panels. So there's a Q&A tab in Hubilo. If you have any questions, put that in the Q&A tab. That's the best way for me to find it. Of course, there's also the chat. You can put that in the chat. And if you're on LinkedIn in the chat, if you have any questions about technical speaking, giving talks, also conferences, we have like, I think, 3 conference organizers also here by coincidence today. So we'll be taking questions on conferences maybe later a little bit. But first we want to focus on the technical speaking aspect, which is today about. And as not everyone probably knows, everyone here, maybe as this is a panel, we start the panel with an introduction round. So as our new guest, maybe Inbal, can you get started with an introduction?
Sure, I'll be happy to. So my name is Inbal Levy. I'm the NB chair for the Israeli national body in the standardization and work with 21. But you've mentioned my relation to conferences, and truth is our Israeli conference is happening next week. And I'm really looking forward to it and excited. And of course, stressed and busy with everything that needs to be, making sure everything is perfect. And we're really excited as well because we have approximately half of our speakers are people, international speakers, and we have Bjarne Starstrup, the creator of C++, coming over giving keynote. So of course it's going to be our largest conference yet. I think conferences are a great opportunity to meet, the international community. And that's actually, how I started. My first exposure to international C++ world was by giving a talk in our local conference, which was organized by Adi and Michael, which I still owe them a lot for that. And I think it's amazing, and the path I did since, and how I got involved in a lot of things that I care a lot about. So I just want to tell people, if you're unsure that you want to take this step, I think you really should. And I really think it opens a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities. That's my experience, at least.
Good luck with the conference, Inbal.
Thank you.
So you want me to go next, Jens? Okay. So hello again, everyone. I'm Phil Nash. You may remember me from the talk earlier, but I'm also a developer advocate at Sonar, which means I get to do this sort of thing a lot, which is one of the reasons that I've racked up over 170 talks now. I also run a conference, C++ on C, which is actually going to be in about 3 weeks. So that's coming up soon as well. That's all going pretty well as well. It's nice to see all the conferences actually coming out of the pandemic times now, not quite back to where they were, but we're getting closer. So that's nice to see. Yeah, I've also got my fingers in lots of other pies. Co-host of CPP Cast now, and also run C++ London. So if you're in the London area, you can come to our meetup. Oh, and I used to be the, I still am the original author of Catch, now Catch 2. I haven't really been an active maintainer for a few years now, but you may know me from that as well. So yeah, the chance you may have come across me before.
Yes, and I also may unmute me to introduce myself. Hey, I'm your host. I'm Jens Böller. I started more than 11 years ago meeting C++. Also have been running a user group for some time. That's this user group here now, but also the user group in Düsseldorf. And generally work a little bit in the last years as a conference organizer, community manager, etc. So let's see if we have any questions. Also, yeah, so see on LinkedIn, yeah, there seems to be the normal quietness at the beginning of a panel. So what questions did I have prepared? Let's maybe talk about what talks are missing from your conference. What talks would you like to see?
I think for my conference, we're probably lacking some of the beginner material. We've got a little bit, but not enough. Nice to see that CPPCon had the Back to Basics track for a few years now. That seems to be going well. Always really popular with the attendees, but we don't get enough submissions for those tracks. So I think we need to do a bit more as organizers to get that sort of content in. You're muted, Jens.
Oh, you're muted.
Yes, as I mentioned already, I think that game dev is like one of those areas which is underrepresented at our conferences, where we definitely could see that, we have submissions on it. Would be nice. Embedded is something which was meeting embedded joining my conference now as a track will probably be a bit more prevalent at my conference. And as I said, yeah, beginner talks, tutorial talks, talks which are not as high level. People often like to talk about the things they work on. And so naturally, if you're working on something interesting, that is always a good talk. And especially if it's like in a field. Last year, Meeting C++ was a very popular talk about from the finance sector. Actually, not yet the most viewed talk, but it's on the way to become the most viewed talk probably within a year.
Nice.
At my channel already has racked up, I think, over 100,000 views, which is pretty good. So there's a lot of things like if you look at the programs from the last years, if you has this been covered? And if you have a thought about that. And of course, yeah, want to hear Inbar's thought on this.
Sure. So I would be really happy to see more tooling talks in our conference. We actually have one that I'm really looking forward to. Anastasia from JetBrains is going to give a standard C++ toolset talk, which I'm really looking forward to see. But I think that debugging, sanitizers, and even a nice talk about compilers, and how do you recognize, how do you, maybe for beginners, how do you feel more comfortable with compilers errors, which is something that I find challenging for beginners. I think those things are really important. We don't have any talks about gaming. That's also unfortunate, because it's also a very fascinating territory. So maybe next year we'll get 2 more. And as you've mentioned, the beginners track is also something that, we were always happy to get talks aimed for beginners, but I really think that at that stage that we only have 4 tracks this year, which is relatively large for our conference. Maybe next year we would actually split it into a different track. And I agree that the CPPCon, having back to basic, I think it's a really important part of a conference. But yeah, there's a lot of topics I'm very interested at. So we'll see what happens.
So, which are common mistakes that should be avoided during a talk?
I think there's 2 mistakes where one leads to the other, and I mentioned it in my talk actually, which is trying to put too much material in for the time allowed, and then speaking too fast because you've got too much material to cover. At least that's a common mistake for me.
You technically took my yeah, I was gonna say
Sorry
that.
about that.
That's fine. I mean, yeah,
And
literally.
for extra emphasis, I had too much material in my talk today.
That happens. I think I had my machine reboot on stage before the talk, just because I connected to the projector. So everything will be fine until you actually connect your machine to the technical things to give your talk. So be prepared to have an earlier version or the current version, if you can, of your talk on a stick to be able to, switch laptops. I think a really big mistake as a speaker is to be late, to show up on time, because if you're on time, you're already late. Especially if you're giving a talk on site. Online, we're trying to get around this problem with pre-recording, so your talk will be on time. But if you're on site, it's really, really important that you have time to pre-check. Sometimes you can do that the day before, but mostly if you've done it before, if you have experience with presenting on various projectors with your machine you're presenting from, it's mostly enough to be 15 minutes, 10 minutes early there to be wired up and to connect your laptop and project your slides, and then to be ready for that, to give your talk.
Want to repeat the point you made about having your talk saved somewhere else as well, whether it's on a USB stick or I always keep all of my talks in Dropbox. So I've actually got all my talks going back to 2004 in there. It's only a couple of times I've had to fall back to that. Ironically, the first time I was actually giving a talk at Distilling. So the company that actually makes display connector technology couldn't connect my laptop to their screens. So I had to fall back to my Dropbox copy and use somebody else's machine. But I had that option. So yeah, it's definitely something to do.
Yeah. And now you have a great story.
Well, exactly, yes.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea to have your talk also on the internet and this time of, where we're living in. Let me see if there's a new question. Yes. I need to copy this over and click add banner and then click show. Also, like, if LinkedIn wants to have an answer to a question, etc., you can post questions to the chat, and I'll be able to also put them in here. So this is a question like about format we're looking for. The standard format is a talk with slides. This is unfortunate sometimes. But I find this is a good question. Like, are you only looking for talks or also like learning sessions which include coding exercises? Yeah, some attendees have laptops, others don't, but yeah. So would something like that be welcome? Let's discuss this.
So I can say for our conference, for example, we have our conference is technically on June 6th and 7th, but we have a pre-conference workshop day on the 5th, on which this is a workshop in a small class with attendees coming with their laptop and actually doing the exercise, coding, etc. We also have more of open, and this actually costs some money, like significant amount of money, because the instructors are actually giving this workshop, and they're professional that this is their livelihood. We also have post-conference workshops which are more open, and they're designed to introduce a topic, not necessarily go that deep into it, but still introduce a topic to people that are new to it. For example, GPUs, and also we have a workshop about Intel technology. I think this is really great to be part of a conference. I think, I mean, personally, I love those. I love to try things by myself. It may be like for a hall full of people, 200 people or 150 people, it may be a bit harder because it's enough that just one or few people are missed the link that you just posted or whatever, and it's kind of harder to do this. But I think that most cases, most conferences should at least have some kind of ability to allow also workshops. And me personally, I'd be happy to get, we'll be happy to get more workshops for our conference. So if you're interested in that, it doesn't have to be like a full day workshop. It's usually the framing, but you could also do like a 1 hour, 2 hour workshop, and that could be awesome as well.
Yeah, we have a similar arrangement with C++ on C, pre-conference workshops, which are typically all day. During the pandemic, we did experiment with half-day workshops during the main program as well. That actually worked out really well, although we were experimenting with a few things at once, and overall it wasn't a massive success, but everybody there really enjoyed it. I wanted to do that again. Now we're back in person, but because the numbers aren't quite high enough, we've actually gone down to 3 tracks instead of the 4 that we had before. I feel like we might be displacing too much of the normal content that way, but once we get a little bit bigger again, I want to give that another try. You could also do workshop style presentation in a normal 60 or 90 minute slot if you're very focused. I think one of the problems starts to be expectations. If people are not expecting to sort of go in and bring their own laptops and actually do something, then not everyone's going to be along with you. There may be a lot of extra disruption as people getting set up, which takes time as well. So I think you need to have that format established, and people know what they're expecting beforehand. So definitely not out of the question. I think it's something to experiment with, but there are some things to take into consideration before doing so, shall we say?
Yeah, I think there's space for that, and there's space for submissions which are unorthodox and which don't, fit the usual talk with slides setting. We have had workshops at Being C++. I don't have them this year, I think, because my experience with workshops has not been that great from the audience take-up. That it's not like an automatically given that that there's a lot of audience coming to the workshop. And also I find it sometimes hard to get the right workshops and to get the feeling like which workshop is actually being taken on by the audience. That's why you need to rent the room, you need to rent the technical things for it. There's a cost which you need to recover as a conference organization, and the overhead it adds to having these people in the workshop. So for Meeting C++, I have found that it's sometimes hard to do that, and I didn't opt to have that this year. Maybe have that again, have some ideas there. But generally on this question, I think yes, this would be great to have something like a coding dojo, okay? If you want to moderate a coding dojo, if you want to give anything in an interactive format where you actually, make it clear from the beginning that, the audience will interact with you, and that you do like a coding quiz or something like that. This can be fun, and people are open to that, to join you in the session at a conference. So yes, there's space for that, and you can definitely submit something like that, and it's very unusual to have such a submission, and you probably will then have at least a conversation with the conference organization to get a feel like, are you able to host this session, and how do we want to make this part of the program? Because maybe we just put you in a normal slot, maybe put it in the evening program. There's other options. One thing we're doing this year at Meeting C++ is we're having the launch back, and so we're going to put a track in the launch where people just meet up parallel to the normal talks and have like a user group meeting, user group organizers. We're going to have a meeting probably on Boost or Qt, depending on who's on the conference, who can, chair that. And so people just meet up and discuss their issues and their experience with the library, with the standard, with the committee. We probably have some committee members, so maybe have a meet the committee session in the launch. That's also very possible and very popular at Meeting C++, the launch session. Let's see, there's new questions.
I think you actually segued nicely into Oliver's question in a way, talking about other alternate formats.
That could very well be. Let's see. We are always talking about workshops. Why don't we modernize it a bit and have also a hackathon to attract the younger generation, which is hopping on Rust Python? Well,
again, those alternate formats, whether it's more hackathon-like or more workshop-like, if it's an established part of the program, there's a definite space to like a track or a day dedicated to that, then when people know what they're going for, then I think that can work really well. I think my concern is when you have it just as like one or two like sporadic sessions, it's not cohesive enough, and people are not going to have the right expectations going in. So yeah, you need enough submissions to make that work, and maybe planning ahead of time to say this is what we're expecting. So it'd be interesting to know how many people really want that sort of content in our communities. Maybe we just need to step up to it.
Yeah, so I'll definitely, it's actually a great idea, and I'll be very supportive of that. I love hackathons. It's kind of a it's kind of a hobby. So yeah, hackathons are a bit different in the sense that, I mean, at least the formats that I'm familiar with is that people are expected to stay awake through the night, and and sometimes people are not like, that's not what they're looking for in a conference. But I think we could definitely do this, and for some smaller group, or whoever is interested, of course. And I think it could be really, really great. So I actually really like this idea, and maybe we'll try it next year. Thank you.
So actually thinking about it, C++ now, they do the library in a week thing, which is sort of like a background hackathon in a way. It's not quite the same thing, but a similar idea. Group of people get together and work on all the projects. By the end of the week, they're going to show off what they've come up with.
We actually had library and language in a week this year. So we also, so people are also working on language feature. But yeah, I agree. It's a great part of CPP now in my mind.
So, yes, there is a hackathon which is right now happening, or which not right now happening, but which is planned, I think, for July from CPP India, which has been announced. So they have a website about that, and they're organizing that. I think, it's a nice format to have if I find someone to organize this, right? You want to run a hackathon, be our guest. On the other hand, conferences always have a little bit of problem to know is the audience wanting to have that or not. We do this with the lounge where we can host things, which is very popular, but like creating new space for things like that needs like folks which take on the organizing. The hackathon from CPP India is sponsored by Undo, and that's probably also an opportunity for sponsors to step up and organize something, add something to the conference, which we sometimes have had that some sponsors like run a coding contest or something. So generally, other formats and new formats are very welcome to the conference world. It's just often a lack of submissions or people wanting to do the putting in the work, which is the other part of organizing, that you have people that get to be the ones which organize this. And some conferences have that. There's like at ACCU, the C++ quiz, which is one person organizing this. And we probably also, at Meeting C++, we had a C++ quiz, which probably will return this year in the evening. So sometimes we have that. Hackathons is now with CPP India maybe starting, and maybe we get some people together to organize a hackathon for the conference next week for Inval. That's gonna be a close call.
Yeah, we do have a quiz, so we at least have that. Diego is gonna do a quiz in our Lightning Talk meetup. But yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to say, and it also relates to the previous question, I think that the sessions that involve audience participation usually turns out to be the best ones. So I definitely want to see more of those, and a hackathon or an interactive workshop are both great examples for that.
Okay. So one question I probably want to cover here is like, what kind of technologies do you prefer or have seen for giving and preparing talks, like tools? Like I know like various formats exist, PowerPoint, etc. Can we like quickly discuss this point? Like, what do you use to prepare your talks? What have you seen from other folks?
Speaking personally, I tend to use Keynote on my Mac for the actual presenting, mostly because I know it inside out, and I can make it do pretty much everything I want. I would like to actually move to something maybe more browser-based, because there's a lot of things I would like to do that would be easier that way, but none of the existing tools that I've seen actually do things the way I would like. So I keep thinking about writing my own, because that's what we do. I haven't got around to it yet. So I keep going back to Keynote, which is fine. But for preparing the talks, I usually just outline stuff in Apple Notes. But any good note-taking tool would be fine for that. I've done mind maps in the past as well, but I found that there's not a big difference between mind maps and outlines for talks. But you can write more sort of long-form notes in a Notes app. Doesn't suit mind maps quite so well. And my first ever talk I did at the ACC conference in 2004, the whole talk was a mind map. Just sort of zoomed around. That actually was quite effective, and I've sometimes tried to reproduce that in a slide format, but never quite achieved the same thing.
Yeah, so my first presentation was in Prezi. So I was very excited and was looking for something unique. But I have to say that since then I just fell back to PowerPoint. I think that in a sense, like I tend to put a lot of effort on how things looks, and I sometimes even too much. Like I'm a bit obsessed with things are being in the right place and all of that. So sometimes just doing the simple thing would be easier for me, because otherwise I'll find waste all my time in fitting colors and caring about the sizes of things. But yeah, I know that people really like, as you've mentioned, web-based things that based on JavaScript. I know one person who writes JavaScript programs, Hannah, for her presentations, and he chose because they're amazing, literally amazing. But you can do really neat things with PowerPoint as well. I really like Barry Rasvin's presentations. He's doing like changing code using some PowerPoint features that I haven't had a chance to check. And I think the most important thing is that feel comfortable with the flow of your presentation. But it's also great to explore new tools. So those are the ones that I know.
Yeah, I still use OpenOffice, and that's on the one hand I like that it limits me, so that I can focus on the actual content, and on the other hand, as Phil said, and yeah, JavaScript or like the CSS and HTML based slide systems are quite nice, where I've been looking at. And the other problem is as a conference organizer, it's not like your new talk, it's like also all the talks or presentations you always try to maintain for the conference, like the welcome message, or for the user group, the welcome message. So changing all of that would be a lot of work. But maybe it's worth it to, just have CSS available to use CSS transitions and do a lot of things in CSS. Would be cool to see if that works out. There was a question about, let me copy that and we can put that in a banner. There's banners here. Which is actually a good question on how much time does it take to prepare a talk?
I can give an answer to this, a precise answer. Actually, it's exactly how much time you have. If you have 6 months, it takes 6 months. If you have an hour, it takes an hour. Maybe an hour is a bit of a push, but
ask Tony one time. An hour is just enough for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's I find myself fixing both large and small things at the last minute as well. Sometimes it's just like constantly. It's like you're think when you prepare a talk, you're constantly iterating over the topic you want to talk about, and it's not even technically necessarily, but also how do you want to present it? How do you want to pass your, emphasize your points and things like that, and it tends to take over your time. So yeah.
I think, yeah, it depends on how much time you want to take up with that. And often, like, have in mind that stuff you're speaking on already has taken up time, right? You learned that maybe, or maybe you use your motivation is to work on the talk because you want to learn something. Like, you want to learn about that feature, and then that is a different approach. And it depends on how much time you want to spend on it. I usually take some time like every week. I have like an afternoon where I work on the talk, or I'm supposed to work on the talk. And then what has helped me a lot in the past is that I'm a bit earlier at the conference because of jet lag when I go to the conferences in the US, or because of travel opportunities. And then when I'm in the hotel, I often use that time to finish the talk. And that's also very common that people, work on their talks during flights or in the hotel or in talks where, they, that's also often why speakers are not able to really provide the slides in front of the conference, because they're still working on the slides. And then just when your talk starts, you finish with the slides often. That's very common.
That's why it's worse to be scheduled at the end of the conference, because then you're going to miss the whole conference because you're going to be in your hotel room preparing your slides.
That's a pro tip. I found it out too late, at least for my first talk, but yeah. But I will mention that for a new speaker, if you're a new speaker, I think that's around 3 months, at least from, the time of the conference, start working on gathering the ideas is the minimum. Because you don't want to, like, you could technically prepare a talk in a month, but me personally, at least from my experience, especially as a new speaker, you want to iterate over it as much as possible and make sure you feel comfortable with the presentation. So I think I'd suggest to try to aim for having 3 months or so in advance since you submit the abstract or you start working on your talk. There's a really good chance you're going to get accepted. So, and if not, you can always give it in the next conference. So yeah, I really think that's like optimal minimum time for new speakers.
And you should try to factor in being able to deliver the talk ahead of the conference to a small group of colleagues or even family, friends, or at a meetup. It's another good opportunity to give a dry run of the talk before the final version, and you'll get some feedback, and the talk will be better because of it. But also because it forces you with that deadline to say, right, it's got to be complete end to end by this date. Then going back, it's just polishing after that. Whereas otherwise, you tend to polish it before it's finished.
And that also helps you practicing your talk, which
yes,
I have been rewriting talks because I was like, yeah, this is this interesting set of slides, but when I give the presentation, it doesn't align up. It's not what I want to do. Or it's I give the talk, I practice the talk, and I'm like, this slide. Even if when I wrote those slides, it was logical to put it here. Now when I give the talk, when I'm in the flow, I kind of find this a difficult slide, and I have to move it somewhere else. I have to rephrase that. So I think that's the other point. It's like part of preparing your talk is also practicing your talk, and like envisioning what's the topics you want to say, and that's why I think it's important to kind of have an outline of your talk, to like have actual slide titles, like and what you want to do in that hour. And I think we are a little bit on the end with questions. So it was almost 2 hours online. I think that's also long enough. So I am quite happy with tonight. So if you still have any questions, maybe post them here, but maybe also Phil or Inbel have a question in their mind which they'd like to ask us or the audience. And if they don't, final things you want to say.
Question for the audience: if you thought about doing a talk but you've never done it yet, what's holding you back that perhaps we could help with, or maybe not? Be interested to know either way. And we have to wait for the streaming delay for them to actually hear this.
Yeah, maybe we get a reaction in chat. Okay, someone says thank you. Inbel, do you have a question in mind for us or the audience, or something to think about?
Yeah, I mean, again, Phil stole my thunder, but I will say that I think that it's more of a comment. I think that giving lightning talks is also a great way to start, because you get used to standing in front of audience. So maybe my question would be, if you are too intimidated by giving a full-length talk, what would hold you back from giving a lightning talk, which is, and I'm not necessarily saying this is easier. You have to take this under consideration when you prepare a lightning talk. Shorter talk can be even harder sometimes, in a sense of you need to manage your time, but it may be less intimidating. So yeah, so I'll continue Phil's question with same thing, but for lightning talks. We do have a lightning talk session in our conference, and this is exactly targeting new speakers. So I'd be happy to.
So I stole your thunder, so you went for lightning talks. That was appropriate. I find the lightning talks are a bit of a paradox. For new speakers, I think they're easier to get into because you've only got 5 minutes to fill. For experienced speakers, they're harder because how can I compress all this material into 5 minutes? But it's just the way it is. So yeah, Rene in the chat says mostly constrained time. So lightning talks might be a good way to go there.
So I know that I've heard all kinds of opinions on lightning talks. I've heard that they're incredibly hard and that they're the most advanced thing you can do. And on the other hand, if you think about the work you have to put in your slides, it can be so much less. Like I've seen people do lightning talks with 1, 2, 3 slides, and they were good. And the other thing is, like, when you want to start speaking or want to, start like presenting things, if a user group is near to you, actually we had a user group at least one user group organizer in the audience today, and we have, I think, 3 on stage here also, which are connected to user groups. User groups also always look for material. They sometimes host lightning talks in front of their program, and that is also where we can host other content like lightning talks. And yeah, what did we talk about just a second? Yeah, quizzes and other content you can host in user group too. So let me quickly see if we have any more questions, but I think we are getting to our time limit.
Yes.
I
think Roberto just had a suggestion for a future
topic. So right. Let's just put that in here that I can put that on screen for technical purposes. So could be like preparing a job interview. Could be that a good talk? And I think yes, it could be.
Yeah, we sometimes forget about the non-technical talks that are still going to be interesting to the particular audience. So job interviews is a great one for people that are new to the to the community. That's exactly the sort of thing they need to hear. We've got to talk C++ on C on burnout as well. That's another thing that can be very relevant to a lot of us.
Yeah, I gave a lightning talk on that. And
yes, you did.
Your thoughts on this, Inba?
Yeah, so I mean, everything that is related to development world can be a great lightning talk. I think in our pre-conference, we had a meetup to prepare people for giving lightning talks in the sense of like encouraging them and giving them some tips and things like that. And I think that there was a topic of how do you educate your team or your group with something new, like how do you propagate the knowledge? How do you make a larger contribution in your company? Everything that is related to this world, I think, is very interesting. And the special thing about it is that by bringing your experience to stage, you're making your talk unique because this is your experience. So, I mean, no one else have the same, background as you. And I think that just by bringing your personal experience is making your talk unique and worth watching. So.
Yeah, and to get back to the question on job interviews, I think there's multiple angles you can cover here. Either your experience as an interviewee or like what tools and what other things you as a company use. I have, and I do complete talks on hiring. I do them on LinkedIn to, make a little bit of advertisement for my job fair. So I've started presenting data which we have through running the job fair, and to do other angles on that. So yes, that'd be a great topic. And other non-technical topics can be welcome at conferences. As Phil mentioned, talk on burnout is something which I saw that on your schedule. It's kind of interesting that you host that on your technical conference. And in that case, just be prepared that some people will give you negative comments. But I don't think like on job interviews you would get that, but like, a complete non-related talk to C++ conferences. I've seen all kinds of comments, even like for keynotes, like, whoa, this wasn't like related to C++ enough, or wasn't what I expected. And it's if you give a keynote or just a general talk, some of the feedback will be useful. Some of the feedback will be just thanks for giving the talk, and some of the feedback will be just people sitting in the wrong room.
You always have a choice.
Yeah. And with that, I think we're going to bring this to an end. I want to thank Phil for preparing the talk and for actually, caring for this and preparing lots of material and covering an interesting topic which we didn't have yet covered. So we will be able to cover that for the coming weeks and months and years. And it helps a lot.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for coming for the panel and also for getting this kicked off last year in Well. So
We're happy to get new talks and new speakers, always.
And thanks everyone who asked questions and contributed in the chat. It's a great crowd.
Yes, thank you for the questions and thank you for coming.
And thank you, Jens, for organizing. This is a great topic, and I'm always happy to. I think it's really important that you keep doing this.
Yes, thank you. That's maybe I want to probably at the end now. It's been a bit more difficult to organize this year because people are really busy, and I think in the coming years maybe it gets easier for me again because I attend conferences too, and then I can. Like if I would have been at C++ Now this year, I probably would have been able to find more speakers. Don't know if I want to say that, but Kevin Henney unfortunately didn't have time. He was very, very pleased about knowing that this event exists and would have loved to take part in it, but he's busy today. So, and we had, Inbar wanted to prepare something, but she's busy with the conference. Also understand that. And then we had another speaker drop out, which is David Sankel, and he's having a fever. That's also a good excuse. And I hope to see some of them next year. And CPP Cast, always awesome to listen to that. We would have had almost, because Timo also was very excited about that, but Timo is on holiday right now, so that's maybe also, I see a lot of speakers knowing about this now, and so we're going to continue that. That's a plan to do that every year, and we have a lot of good content from this year and last year, which is recorded and which I can play for hours and hours and hours, and we're going to see what fresh content we get and then mix up this, and this will be an awesome event. And one of the motivations is just to help the existing speakers to give better talks, and also to just give the new speakers a hand. And I think a lot of the talks and some things which has been mentioned today or last year has helped me and has helped other people. And there's always very, very positive feedback about this event. Has been a lot of positive feedback about this last year. And there's a lot of positive feedback coming for this, probably when this is on YouTube later. And also going to write a blog post about it, so it's going to find its content. And now we're going to stop talking and take us offline. Thank you for coming. I want to thank Phil and Inbal again for hanging out here. And if you want to hang out with us again, then you're welcome to do so. But tonight we are now going to change into the lounge to, just have a casual conversation there. If you want to join me there, you're welcome to do so.